Get that bastard child out of my sight, and never come back here. Rashid Al-Mansour's words cut through the air of the Bel Air estate like a poisoned blade, echoing across the manicured lawns and rose gardens that stretched for acres. Tyra Jenkins, just 23 years old, held her 7-month pregnant belly with one hand and clutched a worn duffel bag with the other, tears streaming silently down her face as she was literally escorted off the property by 2 stone-faced security guards. It was January 2016, a cold winter evening that would change 2 lives forever, setting in motion a chain of events that would ultimately bring a powerful man to his knees. For nearly a year, Tyra had worked as the head gardener on the sprawling $22 million estate, transforming the outdoor spaces into a botanical paradise that had been featured in Architectural Digest and Garden and Gun magazine. She had spent countless hours nurturing rare orchids in the greenhouse, designing intricate topiary displays that spelled out the family name in perfectly sculpted boxwood, and maintaining the Olympic-sized infinity pool surrounded by exotic palms she had personally selected from nurseries across Southern California. For 4 of those months, she had also shared intimate moments with her employer in the shadow of the magnolia trees, a secret affair they both swore to keep until biological reality made it impossible to hide. The relationship had begun seemingly innocently during those long summer evenings when the California sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Rashid would find reasons to walk the grounds late into the night, ostensibly checking on the progress of various landscaping projects. Tyra, dedicated to her craft, often worked past sunset, adjusting irrigation systems and tending to night-blooming jasmine. Polite conversation about soil pH levels and fertilizer ratios turned into lingering glances across beds of lavender and roses, and before either of them fully comprehended what was happening, they were breaking all the unwritten rules between employer and employee. For Tyra, raised by a single grandmother in South Central Los Angeles after her mother died of lupus complications when she was just 12, Rashid represented not just an escape from financial struggle, but an impossible dream of social advancement and recognition. She had worked her way through community college, earning a degree in horticulture while taking on odd landscaping jobs throughout the city. Landing the position at the Al-Mansour estate had been the culmination of years of dedication to her craft. She had genuinely believed that Rashid saw her as more than just hired help, that their connection transcended the vast chasm of wealth and social status that separated them. "Please, Rashid," she begged, her voice breaking as she tried to hold on to what dignity she had left, her work boots planted firmly on the cobblestone driveway she had helped design. "I'm not asking you to marry me or give me money. I'm just saying that you have a responsibility to this child. This baby is your flesh and blood, your legacy." Responsibility? Rashid laughed with a cruelty that froze her blood, adjusting the $95,000 Patek Philippe watch on his wrist as if it were an unconscious gesture of superiority, a physical reminder of the insurmountable distance between them. "My only responsibility is to my reputation, my family, and my empire. Do you really think I'm going to let a simple black gardener, someone who gets dirt under her fingernails for a living, ruin everything I've spent years building, everything my family has built over generations?" The 37-year-old real estate developer, heir to a $3.2 billion property empire spanning 3 continents, and one of the most prominent figures in Los Angeles high society, had spent weeks in denial since Tyra revealed her pregnancy during a particularly vulnerable moment in the greenhouse. First, he tried to convince her to have an abortion, even offering her $75,000 in cash delivered in an unmarked envelope. When she categorically refused, citing not only religious beliefs, but a deep moral conviction about the sanctity of life, he resorted to veiled threats and psychological pressure that grew increasingly sinister with each passing day. He had her followed by private investigators, hoping to find something, anything, he could use to discredit her. He consulted with high-priced lawyers about liability and potential legal exposure. He even considered having her deported, before remembering that she was born in Los Angeles and was as American as he was. Now, faced with the undeniable evidence of her protruding belly and the curious glances of other household staff who whispered among themselves, he made the most cowardly decision possible. "If you tell anyone that this child is mine," Rashid hissed lowly, bringing his face close to hers with a hatred she had never seen before, his breath hot against her cheek, "I guarantee you'll never get a job anywhere in this city again. I'll destroy you, your family, and any future this child may have. I have friends in all the right places, city officials, licensing boards, major landscaping contractors. One phone call from me, and you'll be blacklisted from every garden, every estate, every job opportunity in Southern California." Tyra trembled, not only from the bitter cold of the California night, but from the pure ice in the voice of the man she had naively loved. Her eyes scanned one last time the estate where she had dreamed of building memories, where she had poured her heart and soul into creating beauty. The gardens where they had walked hand in hand after everyone else had gone home. The koi pond where they had shared their first kiss surrounded by water lilies. The rose arbor where he had whispered empty promises about a future he never intended to fulfill. "You'll regret this," were her last words, spoken with a calmness that surprised even her before she walked down the long, tree-lined driveway for the last time, her footsteps echoing on the stone path she had laid with her own hands. Behind her, the automatic gates, flanked by the towering Italian cypresses she had planted 2 years earlier, closed with a definitive clang that sounded like a prison door slamming shut on a chapter of her life. Rashid laughed, watching her disappear into the darkness beyond the wrought iron gates of his property, her silhouette growing smaller against the streetlights. A man like him, accustomed to getting everything he wanted and discarding what no longer served him, believed he never had to regret anything. In his world, money solved problems, lawyers made inconveniences disappear, and people like Tyra were ultimately expendable, easily replaced, quickly forgotten. As the Lyft she had called with her last $35 drove away through the quiet, hedge-lined streets of Bel Air, past mansions worth more than most people would earn in several lifetimes, Tyra placed her hand on her belly and made a silent promise to the child she carried. "He may have kicked us out today, baby, but one day we'll be back. And when we come back, he'll be the one begging. I promise you'll never know the poverty and struggle I've known. You'll have every opportunity, every advantage, everything he tried to deny you." What Rashid Al-Mansour couldn't have imagined in his arrogance was that 16 years later, that bastard child would become the most powerful person in the boardroom where he was about to lose everything, and that Tyra Jenkins had kept much more than just bitter memories of that painful period. She had kept evidence, text messages saved on multiple devices, voice recordings on her phone, time-stamped photographs, security camera footage she had discreetly copied, and secrets that would turn his smug superiority into the most spectacular downfall the Los Angeles elite had ever witnessed. If you feel the injustice of this story burning in your chest, subscribe to the channel to find out how revenge, when served cold for nearly 2 decades, could be devastatingly satisfying. 16 years later, February 2032. The conference room on the 42nd floor of Century Plaza Tower in downtown Los Angeles was tense as a violin string about to snap, the air thick with unspoken anxiety and desperation. Rashid Al-Mansour, now 53 years old with distinguished gray temples that he liked to think made him look distinguished rather than aged, sat at the head of the massive mahogany table, nervously watching the Sentinel Capital executives enter one by one, each carrying leather portfolios and wearing expressions that revealed nothing. His company, Mansour Properties International, was on the verge of complete collapse. A series of disastrous investments in luxury developments that never broke ground, a massive lawsuit from investors who discovered he had misrepresented property values, and a damning expose in the Los Angeles Times about building code violations and bribe inspectors had drained $1.2 billion in just 3 years. The company's stock had plummeted 87%, and creditors were circling like vultures sensing imminent death. Sentinel Capital was his last hope, perhaps his only hope. The only investment firm willing to consider injecting the $650 million needed to save him from total bankruptcy and public humiliation. Every other major firm in the country had already turned him down, some rather gleefully given his reputation for arrogance and the satisfaction many felt at seeing a titan fall. "Gentlemen, ladies, thank you for coming," Rashid said, his voice trying to project confidence while his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his Hermes tie, a nervous habit he couldn't seem to control. "I believe we can reach a mutually beneficial agreement that will restore Mansour Properties to its former glory and provide exceptional returns for Sentinel's portfolio." The door opened, and the final member of the Sentinel team entered, and Rashid felt his heart stop for a moment. A 30-year-old man with rich brown skin and an athletic build walked in with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how much power he wielded. He was wearing a custom Brioni suit that cost more than most people earned in 6 months, and his eyes were piercing, intelligent, and disturbingly familiar in a way that made Rashid's stomach churn with an uncomfortable sense of déjà vu. "Apologies for the delay," said the young man smoothly, sitting down directly across from Rashid in a deliberate power move. Traffic on the 405 was nightmarish as usual. "I'm Marcus Jenkins, managing partner at Sentinel Capital. I'll be personally leading this assessment and making the final recommendation to our board." The surname hit Rashid like a physical blow to his solar plexus. Jenkins. Tyra Jenkins. The face, the strong jawline, the intense eyes, everything about this young man screamed a resemblance he had spent 16 years actively trying to erase from his memory, to pretend had never existed. Could it possibly be coincidence? Los Angeles was a massive city. Jenkins was not an uncommon name, but something deep in his gut told him this was no accident. "Jenkins," Rashid repeated slowly, trying to keep his voice steady despite the panic rising in his chest. "That's an interesting surname. Are you from Los Angeles originally?" Marcus smiled, but there was something calculated and cold behind that smile, like a predator toying with prey. "Yes, born and raised in South Central, actually. My mother always taught me that names carry history and legacy, Mr. Al-Mansour. They tell stories about where we come from and what we've overcome." For the next 90 grueling minutes, Marcus systematically dissected Rashid's business empire with surgical precision that bordered on the sadistic. He knew every shady transaction, every offshore shell company, every falsified inspection report, every questionable decision from the last 8 years. It was as if he had access to information that not even Rashid's internal auditors possessed, as if someone had handed him a comprehensive playbook of every illegal and unethical move the company had ever made. "Interesting that you transferred $18 million to accounts in the Cayman Islands and Dubai last year," Marcus commented casually, leafing through a thick report with color-coded tabs marking particularly damning sections. "Especially considering that those funds came directly from a pension fund investment that you promised would go toward affordable housing development in South Los Angeles. Housing that, curiously, was never actually built." Rashid felt the blood drain from his face. That information was buried so deep, protected by so many layers of legal obfuscation and shell corporations, that not even a CFO had full access to the details. Where did you obtain? "Reliable sources," Marcus interrupted smoothly, his expression never changing. "Sentinel Capital does its homework very, very thoroughly, Mr. Al-Mansour. We believe in knowing exactly who we're doing business with, understanding their character, their ethics, their true nature beneath the expensive suits and polished PR." He paused, making direct eye contact that made Rashid deeply uncomfortable. "We've discovered some truly fascinating things about you." When the meeting finally ended, Rashid was visibly shaken, his shirt damp with nervous sweat despite the perfectly climate-controlled conference room. His hands trembled as he gathered his presentation materials, many of which hadn't even been discussed because Marcus had taken complete control of the conversation. The investment decision would be communicated within 72 hours, they said, but something in Marcus's eyes, a mixture of contempt and satisfaction, suggested that the news would not be good. That night, alone in his office in the estate he was on the verge of losing, with only a glass of expensive scotch for company, Rashid did something he hadn't done in years. He researched Tyra Jenkins on social media and professional networking sites, his fingers shaking as he typed her name into the search bar. What he found took his breath away and made his scotch taste like ash in his mouth. After being thrown out of his estate pregnant and alone, she had returned to South Central, given birth to Marcus in a crowded county hospital with only her elderly grandmother by her side, and then done something absolutely extraordinary. With a determination that bordered on superhuman, she had studied landscape architecture at night while working multiple jobs during the day, waitressing, retail, anything to pay the bills. She had graduated with honors from Cal Poly Pomona, then earned a master's degree in sustainable urban planning from UCLA. But that was just the beginning. The most shocking discovery came when he found her profile on the Sentinel Capital website, listed among the senior leadership team. Tyra Jenkins, now 39 years old and more beautiful than he remembered, was listed as Senior Strategic Advisor and Director of Corporate Intelligence and Due Diligence. She wasn't just Marcus's mother. She was his business partner, his mentor, his co-conspirator in what Rashid was beginning to realize might be an elaborately planned revenge. The corporate headshot showed a woman transformed, confident, powerful, wearing a designer suit and an expression of quiet triumph. The biography listed her accomplishments, transforming struggling companies, exposing corporate fraud, pioneering new models of ethical investment. She had literally built a career out of investigating and exposing people exactly like him. His phone rang suddenly, the sound cutting through the silence of his office like a gunshot, making him spill his drink. The caller ID showed a block number. His hand shook as he answered. Hello. Hello, Rashid. The female voice was more mature, more confident, but unmistakably familiar. A voice that had haunted his dreams more times than he cared to admit over the years. This is Tyra Jenkins. I believe you had the pleasure of meeting my son today. Rashid's blood froze in his veins, his heart pounding so hard he thought he might have a cardiac event. Tyra, how did you get my private number? She laughed softly, a sound that sent chills down his spine. I've obtained a lot more than your phone number in the last 16 years, Rashid. You'd be amazed what a motivated woman with intelligence and resources can discover when she sets her mind to it. You taught me that information is power, remember? Or maybe you don't remember your own threats. What do you want? Rashid asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I want you to remember a promise I made 16 years ago, standing in the driveway of your estate, holding my pregnant belly while you called my child a bastard, Tyra said, her voice cold and precise. I told you that you would regret this. Well, Rashid, the time for your regret has arrived. The bill is due, and I'm here to collect with interest. Tyra, please. Save it. She cut him off sharply. You had 16 years to feel remorse, to search for us, to try to make amends. You chose not to. You chose to pretend we never existed, to go on living your life of luxury and privilege without a second thought for the woman you threw away or the child you rejected. Now you get to live with the consequences. The line went dead, leaving Rashid alone with a crushing, suffocating weight of realization. The woman he had humiliated and discarded like garbage had not only survived against all odds, she had thrived spectacularly. And now, with the calculated coldness of someone who had planned every move for 16 years, she was ready to collect on a debt he didn't even know he owed. What Rashid hadn't yet discovered was that Marcus and Tyra weren't just planning to deny the investment. They had spent years methodically gathering evidence of every financial crime he had committed, every inspector he had bribed, every building code he had violated, every investor he had defrauded, every law he had broken. And in 48 hours, that information would be in the hands of the FBI, the SEC, the IRS, and every major newspaper in California. The empire he had built on corruption and greed was about to come crashing down, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The next morning arrived too quickly, with Rashid having slept perhaps 2 hours on his office couch, haunted by memories and fears. He arrived at the Sentinel Capital headquarters with barely concealed desperation, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. The sleek glass and steel building in Century City looked like a courthouse where he was about to be sentenced, its modern architecture seeming to judge him with cold indifference. Marcus was waiting for him in the main conference room, but this time he wasn't alone. Tyra Jenkins entered right behind her son, and Rashid felt his legs almost give way beneath him. She was stunning in ways that went beyond mere physical beauty. There was an aura of power and confidence around her that came from years of hard-won success and the deep satisfaction of having transformed her life and her son's future into something extraordinary. Her hair was styled in an elegant professional cut, and she wore an Armani suit that cost more than he used to pay her in a month. But it was her eyes that truly unnerved him. They held no anger, no bitterness, just a calm, almost serene certainty that she had already won. "Hello, Rashid," she said calmly, sitting down next to Marcus with the easy grace of someone who belonged in these spaces. 16 years is a long time, don't you think? Long enough to build an entire life, raise a son, create a career. Long enough for a pregnant gardener to become one of the most respected names in corporate intelligence. Rashid stammered, completely out of his usual element, his legendary ability to command any room utterly failing him. "Actually," Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting like surgical steel, "I think we should clear up a few things before we discuss business. Before you waste another second of our time with whatever lies or excuses you've prepared. Mom, why don't you show him what we found?" Tyra opened an expensive leather portfolio and methodically spread documents across the polished conference table. They were photographs, bank statements, audio recordings, printed emails, legal documents, property records, 16 years of meticulously collected evidence, organized with the precision of a prosecutor building an airtight case. "Do you remember this recording, Rashid?" She tapped her tablet screen, and an audio file began playing. His own voice, younger but unmistakable, echoed through the room with crystal clarity. "If you tell anyone that this child is mine, I guarantee you'll never get a job anywhere in the city again. I'll destroy you, your family, and any future this child may have. I have friends in all the right places." Marcus stiffened visibly, his jaw clenching and his fists tightening involuntarily on the armrests of his chair. It was the first time he had actually heard the voice of the man who had rejected him before he was even born, who had called him a bastard when he was nothing more than cells dividing in his mother's womb. "Or this bank transfer," Tyra continued smoothly, pointing to a highlighted document with meticulous annotations. $275,000 to City Councilman Rodriguez in exchange for his vote in favor of your Harbor District Development Project, the one that displaced 300 families from rent-controlled housing. She pulled out another document. "Or this email where you specifically instruct your lead architect to falsify earthquake safety reports because proper reinforcement would have cut into your profit margins. That building houses 400 people, Rashid. 400 human beings whose lives you risked for money." Rashid's face had gone completely white, all color draining away as if someone had opened a valve. "How did you? This is impossible." 16 years of patience and systematic planning, Tyra replied, her voice almost gentle, which somehow made it more devastating. "You taught me a valuable lesson that night, Rashid. You taught me that information is power, that the wealthy and connected use knowledge as a weapon. So I decided to become an expert at gathering information. I spent years building a network of sources, disgruntled employees who you treated poorly, contractors you cheated, city workers who were disgusted by your corruption. People talk to someone who actually listens to them, who treats them with respect." She leaned forward slightly. "I became very, very good at my job. Some might say I became obsessed. But when you're motivated by protecting your child from a monster, obsession becomes dedication." Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Los Angeles skyline, his back to everyone, his shoulders tense. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled with barely contained emotion. "So it's all true. You really are my biological father." He practically spat the last word. "Marcus, David." Rashid tried to approach him, using the wrong name in his confusion and panic, but the young man cut him off with a look of such pure disdain that Rashid actually stepped backward. "My name is Marcus. You don't get to call me David or anything else." He turned fully to face Rashid, and there were tears of rage glistening in his eyes. "You know what makes me angrier than the fact that you abandoned us? It's that you're so small, so pathetically cowardly, that you don't even deserve to be called my father. My father should have been someone with courage, with integrity, with basic human decency. You're none of those things." At that precise moment, as if choreographed in a play, the conference room door opened and 4 federal agents entered, their badges gleaming on their belts, their expressions professional and implacable. "Rashid Al-Mansour," said the lead agent, a woman in her 40s with steel-gray eyes. "You're under arrest for multiple counts of tax evasion, money laundering, bribery of public officials, wire fraud, securities fraud, and corporate malfeasance. You have the right to remain silent." Handcuffs clicked around Rashid's wrists with a sound that seemed to echo forever in the suddenly silent room. He stared at Tyra in complete disbelief, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. "You did this? You set me up?" "No," she replied with perfect calmness, standing up to face him directly, finally allowing him to see the full extent of her transformation and triumph. "You did this to yourself over years of criminal behavior. I just documented it meticulously and made sure the right people saw the evidence. The FBI and the IRS were extremely interested in our files. Apparently, you owe approximately $340 million in unpaid taxes, in addition to all the other charges. They're calling it one of the largest cases of real estate fraud in California history." As the agents began to lead Rashid away, he shouted desperately over his shoulder, his voice cracking, "Marcus, you're my son, my blood. That has to mean something. We're family." Marcus didn't even turn around from the window. He kept staring out at the city, his voice eerily calm. "My father died 16 years ago before I was even born. The man being arrested is just some criminal who happens to share my DNA. Blood means nothing without love, without presence, without sacrifice. You gave me none of those things." After Rashid was taken away, his protests fading as the elevator doors closed, David finally collapsed into his chair, the full emotional weight of the situation crashing down on him like a tidal wave. The adrenaline that had been keeping him upright suddenly drained away, leaving him feeling exhausted and hollow. Tyra gently placed her hand on his shoulder, the same hand that had comforted him through every scraped knee, every disappointment, every triumph of his childhood. "Are you okay, baby?" Marcus took a deep, shuddering breath, wiping his eyes quickly. "I'm okay. You know, for so many years, I wondered what my father would be like. I used to imagine him showing up one day with a good reason for being gone, like he'd been in witness protection or had amnesia. I used to dream about a tearful reunion." He laughed bitterly. "Now I know I didn't miss anything. The only parent I needed was you, Mom. You taught me values, integrity, compassion, perseverance. Everything he clearly never had and never will have." Tyra smiled, tears of pride streaming down her face, leaving tracks through her makeup. "You know what the best part of all this is?" "What?" "His company and all his assets are going up for auction next month to pay off his debts, legal fees, fines, and victim restitution," she said, a satisfied smile crossing her face. "And we have enough capital and investor backing to buy it all. We're going to completely transform it, turn it into a sustainable development company focused on affordable housing and green architecture. Everything he refused to build, we'll build. We'll create the communities he destroyed." She paused, looking at her son with immense pride. "We're going to turn his toxic legacy into something that actually helps people, that makes the world better. That's real power." What had begun as a story of abandonment, humiliation, and cruel injustice had turned into the most poetic form of revenge imaginable. Not just the destruction of the man who had rejected them, but the transformation of his corrupt empire into something positive and lasting, something that would help thousands of people in the communities he had exploited. 6 years later, March 2038, the former Mansour Properties International headquarters had become Renaissance Urban Development, one of the fastest-growing sustainable housing companies in the United States. The corporate building in downtown Los Angeles, once a symbol of greed and corruption, now boasted LEED Platinum certification, rooftop solar arrays, and a vertical garden designed by Tyra herself that purified the city's air and had become a landmark photographed by tourists from around the world. Marcus Jenkins, now CEO at 36, was in his top-floor office reviewing quarterly reports that showed remarkable numbers that would have been unthinkable just 6 years earlier. $3.7 billion in annual revenue, 15,000 units of affordable housing built in underserved communities, 75,000 jobs created, and partnerships with 200 community organizations across California. On the wall behind his desk, alongside his MBA from Stanford and various business awards, hung a framed photo showing him and Tyra at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Compton Community Gardens project, a 10-acre green space in her old neighborhood that provided fresh produce, job training, and hope to a community that had been systematically neglected for decades. Mr. Jenkins, his assistant, announced over the intercom with her usual efficiency, "Mail has arrived from the Federal Correctional Facility." Marcus sighed deeply, the familiar weight of resignation settling over him. Every month, without fail, a letter arrived from Rashid, always with the same pathetic tone. Apologies that rang hollow after so many years. Desperate attempts to establish a father-son connection that had never existed. Pleas for a visit, for forgiveness, for acknowledgement. This time, like all 72 previous times, Marcus threw the letter straight into the recycling bin without opening it. He had read the first few out of morbid curiosity, but they all said essentially the same thing, and there was nothing in them that could change the fundamental truth of who Rashid was. Rashid Al-Mansour was currently serving year 6 of a 30-year sentence in a federal correctional facility outside of San Bernardino. In addition to his prison sentence, he had lost literally everything that had once defined him. His Bel Air estate, including the gardens Tyra had designed, had been auctioned off to a tech entrepreneur who had ironically hired Tyra's firm to restore and maintain them. His bank accounts, offshore and domestic, had been completely drained by fines, restitution payments, and legal fees. His entire identity had been reduced to an inmate number and a cautionary tale. The international Arabic newspapers and society magazines that had once celebrated him as a brilliant businessman and eligible bachelor now treated him as a disgrace to his family name. His relatives in the Middle East had publicly disavowed him, and his name had been removed from the family business entirely. The office door opened, and Tyra entered carrying an armful of elegant invitations printed on heavy cardstock. At 45, she radiated an elegance and quiet power that came not only from financial success, but from the deep satisfaction of having transformed her life and her sons into something that actually mattered, something that helped people rather than exploited them. "The invitations for the annual scholarship gala have arrived," she said, placing them carefully on Marcus's desk. "We have 800 guests confirmed, including the governor, 6 senators, the mayor, and basically everyone who matters in California philanthropy and business. We should raise at least $80 million for education and job training programs in underserved communities." Marcus smiled genuinely as he looked through the list of names. A who's who of California's political and business elite. Politicians, celebrities, tech billionaires, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, influential academics, and activists. All of them were now vying for the attention and favor of the Jenkins family, desperately wanting to be associated with their success story and their mission. The irony was delicious. The same people who would have looked right through Tyra when she was a pregnant gardener now courted her approval. "You know what makes me most proud?" asked Tyra, settling into the comfortable leather armchair across from her son's desk, kicking off her heels with a satisfied sigh. "What, Mom?" "That we achieved all of this without compromising our principles," she said, her voice filled with genuine satisfaction. "We didn't bribe anyone, didn't step on innocent people to climb higher, didn't cut corners or cheat. We worked hard, played by the rules, and still won. We proved that it's possible to be wildly successful and maintain your integrity. That's what I want to be our legacy." She paused, looking out the window at the sprawling city below, at the neighborhoods they were helping to transform. "We showed that you can come from nothing, face the worst kind of rejection and cruelty, and still build something beautiful without becoming like the people who hurt you. Marcus stood up and joined his mother at the window, watching the endless movement on the streets far below, people rushing to appointments, living their lives, pursuing their dreams. Sometimes I wonder if he understands what he really lost. I'm not talking about money or power or reputation, though obviously he lost all of that. I mean, whether he grasped that he lost the chance to be part of something meaningful, to have a real family, to contribute to his son's life, to build actual relationships instead of just transactions. He understands, Tyra replied softly, her voice carrying the wisdom of years of reflection. That's why he writes every week, why his letters get more desperate each time. But understanding what you've lost and deserving a chance to regain it are two completely different things. Some mistakes are simply too big, some wounds cut too deep. He made his choice 16 years ago when he called you a bastard and threw me out into the street. He doesn't get to unmake that choice now. At that moment, the assistant entered again, looking slightly flustered. Sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent call from the University Foundation you support. They want to confirm the $150 million donation for scholarships and want to discuss the naming rights for the new student center. Marcus nodded decisively. Confirm the donation. But no building names after us. We talked about this. I want it named after my great-grandmother, Rosa Jenkins. She raised my mother with nothing but Social Security checks and love, and she deserves to be remembered. And make sure the scholarship criteria specify that at least 70% must go to young people from communities like South Central and Compton, kids who look like my mother and me, kids who need someone to believe in them. After the assistant left, Tyra approached her son and embraced him tightly, the way she had done countless times throughout his life. Your grandmother would be so proud of you. I wish she had lived to see this, to see what we built. She saw enough, Marcus said, returning the embrace. She saw me graduate high school at the top of my class. She knew I was going to be okay because I had you as my mother. That's what families do. They lift each other up, they sacrifice, they show up even when it's hard. DNA is just biology. Family is about love and action. He pulled back slightly to look at his mother. That's what he'll never understand. He thinks sending letters from prison earns him some kind of redemption, that acknowledging my existence now, somehow, makes up for 16 years of nothing. But it doesn't work that way. You can't abandon someone and then demand a relationship when it's convenient for you, when you've lost everything else and suddenly decide your son might be worth something after all. The irony was absolutely perfect and devastatingly cruel. Rashid had rejected Marcus out of fear that acknowledging a child with a black gardener would tarnish his prestigious reputation, would make him a subject of gossip among the elite, would somehow diminish his status in Los Angeles society. Now that same bastard child was respected across the country as a visionary leader in sustainable development, a generous philanthropist, and an example of business ethics and social responsibility. His TED Talks have been viewed millions of times. He had been featured on the cover of Forbes, Fortune, and Time magazine. Universities competed to give him honorary degrees. Meanwhile, Rashid was wasting away in a federal prison, his days indistinguishable from one another, forgotten by virtually everyone except his lawyers and the son who refused to acknowledge him. His only companions were regret, loneliness, and the crushing weight of his own choices. The best revenge, Kesha had once told Tyra during a mentorship conversation years ago, isn't to destroy your enemy. It's to become so successful, so fulfilled, so genuinely happy that their entire existence becomes irrelevant to your life. They become a footnote while you become the main story. And that was exactly what had happened. The unexpected encounter. 3 months later, Marcus found himself in an unusual situation. He was giving the keynote address at a prison reform conference in Sacramento, speaking about second chances and rehabilitation programs. His company had started partnering with correctional facilities to provide job training in sustainable construction and landscaping to inmates preparing for release. During the Q&A session, a corrections officer approached him. Mr. Jenkins, there's an inmate at our San Bernardino facility who claims to know you. He's asked if you would consider visiting as part of your prison program evaluation. He says his name is Rashid Al-Mansour. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The room suddenly seemed to tilt. No, he said firmly, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I don't know him. Not in any way that matters. But the question haunted him for weeks. Tyra noticed her son's distraction during their weekly dinner at her hillside home, a beautiful property she had designed herself, surrounded by gardens that rivaled anything she had ever created. You're thinking about visiting him, aren't you? She asked gently, pouring them both tea on her terrace overlooking the city lights. Marcus sighed. Is it crazy that part of me wants to? Not for him. I don't know him anything. But maybe for me. Maybe I need to look him in the eye as a successful man and tell him exactly what I think of him. Close that door definitively. Tyra considered this carefully. It's not crazy. You're not that scared pregnant baby in my belly anymore. You're a grown man who has achieved extraordinary things. If you need to face him to find closure, I understand. But Marcus, baby, promise me something. What? Don't let him take anything from you. Not your peace, not your joy, not your sense of self-worth. You've built a beautiful life. Don't give him the power to disturb it. 2 weeks later, Marcus found himself driving through the desert toward the federal correctional facility, his heart pounding despite his outward calm. He had told himself 100 times he was doing this for closure, but he wasn't entirely sure what he hoped to accomplish. The visiting room was depressing. Industrial lighting, scratched plastic tables, the smell of industrial cleaner and desperation. When Rashid was brought in, Marcus barely recognized him. The man who had once exuded arrogance and power now looked diminished, older than his 59 years. Prison had stripped away the expensive suits, the watches, the trappings of wealth that had defined him. What remained was just a broken man in a standard-issue jumpsuit. Rashid's eyes filled with tears the moment he saw Marcus. You came. I never thought. Thank you for coming. Marcus sat down slowly, his expression carefully neutral. I didn't come for you. I came for myself, to see if the man I've spent years imagining as some kind of monster is really just pathetic. Rashid flinched as if he'd been slapped. I deserve that. I deserve worse. You do, Marcus agreed coldly. So let's be clear about why I'm here. This isn't reconciliation. This isn't the beginning of some heartwarming relationship. I'm here to tell you exactly what I think of you, and then I'm going to leave and never come back. I understand, Rashid whispered, his hands trembling on the table between them. Do you? Marcus leaned forward. Do you understand that you didn't just abandon a pregnant woman? You tried to destroy her. You threatened her livelihood, her future, her dignity. You called me, your own child, a bastard before I was even born. You made her feel like garbage for the crime of loving you and carrying your child. Tears streamed down Rashid's face. I was a coward. I was terrified of what people would think, of losing my status. You were worse than a coward, Marcus interrupted harshly. Cowards are weak, but ultimately harmless. You were cruel. You wielded your power like a weapon against someone who had no defenses. And you felt good about it. I heard the recording, remember? There was satisfaction in your voice when you threatened her. Rashid covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. I hate who I was. I think about it every single day. If I could go back. But you can't, Marcus said flatly. That's the thing about choices, Rashid. They have consequences. You made yours, and now you're living with them. Just like my mother and I lived with yours for 16 years while you enjoyed your mansion and your reputation. Please, Rashid begged, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but you're my son, my blood. Doesn't that count for something? Marcus stood up abruptly. You know what? I had a father growing up. Her name was Tyra Jenkins. She worked 3 jobs so I could go to private school. She stayed up helping me with homework after 14-hour days. She taught me what integrity looks like, what real strength is. She was both mother and father to me, and she was better at both roles than you could ever have been at one. He turned to leave, then paused. I hope you do find peace somehow. Not for your sake, for yours. Because carrying around all that guilt and regret for the next 24 years of your sentence sounds like its own kind of hell. But that's your burden to carry, not mine. I'm not taking it on. Wait, Rashid called out desperately. Will you at least? Can I write to you? Can I know about your life? Marcus looked back at him with something almost like pity. You can write if you want. I won't stop you. But I won't read the letters. I have a full life, an amazing mother, a successful career, friends, purpose. I don't have room in it for you. Goodbye, Rashid. As Marcus walked out of the prison into the bright California sunshine, he felt something unexpected: lightness. The man he had built up in his mind as this looming figure of rejection and abandonment was just a sad old man paying for his crimes. Not worth the emotional energy Marcus had spent on him over the years. He called his mother from the parking lot. I did it. I went to see him. How do you feel? Tyra asked, concern evident in her voice. Free, Marcus said, surprising himself with the truth of it. I finally feel free of him. He's not my father. He's just a man who made terrible choices. And I'm finally okay with that. I'm proud of you, baby, Tyra said softly. Come over for dinner tonight. I made your grandmother's jambalaya. I'll be there, Mom. I love you. I love you more. The legacy. 5 years later, in 2043, Renaissance Urban Development celebrated its 15th anniversary with a gala that drew national attention. The company had just completed its largest project yet, a 5,000-unit mixed-income housing community in Los Angeles that included schools, medical clinics, community gardens, and job training centers. It was being hailed as a model for sustainable urban development across the country. Marcus, now 41 and serving on the boards of multiple nonprofit organizations, stood at the podium addressing a crowd of 1,200 people. Behind him, projected on massive screens, were before and after photos of the communities they had transformed. 15 years ago, Marcus began, his voice strong and confident. This company was something very different. It was built on greed, corruption, and exploitation. It represented everything wrong with unchecked capitalism. The belief that profit matters more than people, that the rich deserve comfort while the poor can struggle in substandard housing. He paused, looking out at the audience. My mother and I bought this company from bankruptcy and federal seizure not because we wanted to preserve what it was, but because we saw an opportunity to transform it into what it should have been all along. We wanted to prove that you could be profitable and ethical, successful and compassionate, powerful and principled. The crowd erupted in applause. Tyra, sitting in the front row at 50 years old and looking radiant, wiped tears from her eyes. But this isn't really a story about business, Marcus continued. It's a story about second chances. Not for the man who founded this company, but for the communities he neglected and exploited. It's about believing that every child, regardless of where they're born or who their parents are, deserves a safe home, a good education, and a fair shot at success. He gestured to the screens behind him. Every unit we build, every job we create, every garden we plant, it's all a repudiation of the belief that some people matter more than others because of their wealth or status or skin color. It's proof that the arc of the moral universe really does bend toward justice, even if we have to help bend it ourselves. After the gala, as guests mingled over champagne and catered hors d'oeuvres, a young woman approached Marcus nervously. She was about 19, clearly uncomfortable in formal wear. Mr. Jenkins? I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to thank you personally. My name is Jasmine Rodriguez. I grew up in the Compton housing project that your company renovated 5 years ago. Before that, we had mold, broken heat, rats. It was awful. Now we have a real home. And the scholarship program you funded? I just finished my first year at USC studying engineering. Marcus smiled warmly, shaking her hand. That's exactly why we do this, Jasmine. Tell me, what kind of engineering? Sustainable design, she said, her eyes lighting up. I want to build things that help people like you and your mother do. My little brother, he's 12, and he talks about you all the time. He says he wants to be like you when he grows up. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. You know what? I'd love to meet him. We have an internship program for high school students. When he's old enough, have your mother call my office. We'll find a spot for him. As Jasmine walked away beaming, Tyra approached her son. You handled that beautifully. Rosa would have been so proud. I was thinking about her today, Marcus admitted. about how she raised you with nothing but love and determination. That's the real legacy, isn't it? Not the buildings or the money. It's the values we pass on, the example we set. Speaking of legacy, Tyra said carefully, I got a call from the warden at San Bernardino last week. Rashid is seriously ill. Liver cancer. They're saying maybe 6 months. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. And nothing. I'm not telling you what to do. You made your peace with this years ago. I just thought you should know. Marcus nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. But no, I'm not visiting him. That chapter is closed. He made his choices, I made mine. I hope he finds whatever peace he can in the time he has left, but I'm not the person who can give that to him. Understand, Tyrus said, squeezing his hand. I'm not suggesting you should. I just wanted you to have the information. Mom, Marcus said suddenly, do you ever regret it? The affair, getting pregnant, all the pain you went through. Tyra looked at her son with infinite love. Not for a single second. Yes, he hurt me. Yes, those early years were harder than I can ever fully express. But they gave me you. And you, Marcus Jenkins, are the greatest accomplishment and the deepest joy of my life. Every sacrifice, every struggle, every moment of pain was worth it to be your mother. She gestured around the glittering ballroom full of people celebrating their achievements. Besides, look what we built together. We didn't just survive, we thrived. We took the worst thing that ever happened to me and transformed it into something beautiful that helps thousands of people. That's not just success, that's redemption. That's poetry. Marcus hugged his mother tightly. I love you, Mom. None of this means anything without you. I love you too, baby. Always. Epilogue, 6 months later. Rashid Al-Mansour died alone in the prison infirmary on a Tuesday morning in September. The news made a small paragraph in the business section of the Los Angeles Times. Real estate developer dies in prison. His remaining family in the Middle East declined to claim his body. He was buried in a county cemetery in an unmarked grave. Marcus learned about it from a lawyer handling the estate. What little remained of it after restitution payments and legal fees. There was nothing to inherit, no final message, no deathbed redemption. Just an ending that matched the life, empty and devoid of real connection. Marcus didn't attend any service because there wasn't one. He didn't feel the need to visit the grave. Instead, that weekend, he and Tyra went to the Compton Community Gardens, the project they had built on the site where Tyra had grown up, where Marcus's great-grandmother Rosa had raised Tyra in a tiny apartment that no longer existed. They walked through the rows of vegetables being tended by neighborhood families, past children playing on the playground they had funded, through the greenhouse where teenagers learned horticulture and job skills. This is the real legacy, Marcus said, watching a group of kids laughing as they watered tomato plants. Not buildings or money or power, but the lives we touch, the opportunities we create, the hope we plant. Tyra nodded, her hand in her son's. You know, for a long time I was so angry at him. The anger ate at me, kept me up at night. But building all this, helping all these people, somewhere along the way I'll let go of the anger. Not because he deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. Do you think he ever understood what he threw away? Marcus asked. In the end? Probably. But understanding and changing are different things. Some people are too broken to fix, too proud to admit they were wrong until it's far too late. She squeezed her son's hand. But that's not our story anymore. He's not part of our story. This is our story, this garden, these kids, this community. This is what matters. As the sun set over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, mother and son sat on a bench in the garden and watched families enjoying the space they had created. In the distance, they could hear music from a community barbecue, children's laughter, the sounds of life being lived fully and joyfully. Marcus looked at his mother, the woman who had been thrown out of a mansion pregnant and alone, who had survived and thrived against impossible odds, who had taught him that true strength comes from character, not circumstances.